Welcome to the We Are Wake Tech podcast with your host, Wake Tech President, Dr. Scott Rawls.
Happy New Year, and welcome to a new year of the We Are Wake Tech podcast. I'm your host, Scott Rawls. And to kick off this new year, we have a Wake Tech superstar, Amy McDonald, Dean of Sponsored Programs, who's joining us today. She's going to tell us what sponsored programs mean, but also really why they are so important and why Wake Tech's been so successful in grants and other areas that support our college. But before we start, welcome, Amy. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Amy. It's an exciting time in your life with young ones, but tell us a little bit about your journey to Wake Tech and to this place as Dean of Sponsored Programs, a big role here at Wake Tech.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I've been at the college about 10 years now, and I have always worked under grants. So starting in graduate school when I was a research assistant and funded by grants, I really got a glimpse of how there's this world that's funded by other people matching work to their priorities. So from graduate school, I went on to...
And where was that? Where was graduate school?
At University of Michigan. So it's been a good football...
Good weekend.
Good
time for a good year for Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. So in graduate school, I was really interested in social justice work. And so looking a whole cycle at people and how they move through the world, education was just a really critical component to economic mobility. And so I was studied environmental policy and health disparities among low-income people and people of color, and moved from graduate school to be an EPA intern, focusing on some real disadvantaged communities in Colorado. And then on to my first job, which was funded by private grant dollars, working in North Carolina on state-level climate change policy. So that was an interesting time working at the state legislature, seeing how funds get allocated to different programs and priorities. From there, I moved to UNC Chapel Hill, where I managed a statewide grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So I learned the federal grants landscape, working across the state with health departments focused on childhood lead poisoning prevention and other in-home health risks. Mm-hmm. And doing that work and working with families, especially those who didn't have a lot of economic mobility, I really saw that like your way to a better life is through your job. And to get a good job, you need a good education. And a lot of those students needed affordable education, much like I did. I'm a first-generation college student. And so it fit to kind of, in a roundabout way, put together this grants experience that I have and come to Wake Tech, where I started as the first full-time person working to support our grants performance. And so from there, I moved into the dean role about 5 years ago and haven't looked back since.
Well, you've taken us a long way. So from Michigan to Colorado, and was it the job that brought you to North? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so about 20 miles from the Canadian border. And it's very rural, very isolated. Michigan doesn't have as many community colleges as North Carolina. I only knew a little bit about community colleges. We had a tribal school locally. It's very small. But I made my way to sort of bigger and bigger towns with each step through school. And I came to North Carolina. I did a job interview in Asheville, and the job was in Raleigh, and I'd never been to Raleigh before. So I drove from Denver with all my stuff in my car, showed up in Raleigh, immediately got lost on the Beltline, and had to call my boss, because this was before maps on your phone, date myself and say, I'm in a place, it was Fuquay Varina, interestingly, and she basically said, turn around, you've gone too far. And so I just somehow fell into a really great group of people through my jobs and being active in the community, and I've been here ever since.
Well, we're very fortunate you found your way to Raleigh and to North Carolina and to Wake Tech. And I noticed, there's a little bit of a theme in your previous grant work. You kept noting economic mobility, and we talk a lot about that at Wake Tech, and I know you've kind of woven that into the purpose and goals of our grants efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a strong foundation of grants that had built over time at the college before I got here. A lot of good work from folks matching up the college's needs with different federal grant opportunities. And I would say, a lot of the funding is to address unmet needs, and so we're seeing it more and more funding become available to try to address disparities and equity. So it's been a pleasure of mine to get to look at all the programs at Wake Tech, look at all of our students and what they need, and then work with our very skilled team and sponsor programs to try to match those funding opportunities with a great proposal that can bring dollars into the college.
Yeah, and you and your team have been quite successful. And as we transition into a new year, we look back at a previous year, and it was a year of records at Wake Tech, but certainly one of the records for Wake Tech is we reached a threshold with over $20 million in sponsored programs, grants and other forms of federal funding or other forms of grant funding, private too, that your team oversaw and was responsible for. So don't be shy. Brag a little bit about the performance here recently and the trajectory over that 10 years of your career.
Yeah, thank you. So I think our office, we have a team of 7, and we tend to keep a low profile. It's not that we're not very proud of our work, but we really want to recognize that it's grant leaders across the college that lead these projects, that come to us with needs and ideas. So we never want to steal all the credit from raising these dollars, but we are very proud of the work, and each person on our team works hard every day to try to bring resources in and oversee them well. So in the 22-23 year, we essentially doubled where we were 5 years ago at about $9 million 5 years ago to $20 million this past year. And that's been just incredible, not just from an application standpoint and being able to find opportunities and apply, but also in the management side. So because grants are multi-years, they stack up. So you might have one $20 million year, but you've got previous years of active projects. So we had a portfolio of about $67 million that year for our post-award team to oversee, as well as folks in financial and business services who also do a lot of work on our grants.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things there that I think really speak to how strong your team is at Wake Tech, one of which is fostering innovation. As you noted, you're the ones who help lead us to the opportunities and write and get us, but the ideas kind of exist within the organization, and your team helps pull them out to a place and helps us refine them to a place where they're considered for funding opportunities. That's a unique skill.
Yeah, it's interesting because we sort of play this role of being innovators, but also compliance people from the oversight side. So it's interesting, couple of hats that we wear. But I think the Reach and Rally plan has been just a super resource for us. It's so robust. There are so many detailed, evidence-based ideas in there, plans that we have, some of them with funding, some of them still needing funding, and it has really given us a roadmap to scan the funding landscape, which changes year to year. Folks often ask me, which came first, the grant idea or the grant? And it's usually both. You know, we have our goals, we have what we think will work to kind of move the needle on student success, and we're looking for funders who their priorities match up with ours. And sometimes the funding comes along and we scramble to try to not miss a deadline because the opportunity is so great. So it's an interesting world. I think we all enjoy getting to know the whole college and the variety of programs that we have, and really address the needs of students, address new programs of study that might be built, enhance current programs, and then provide for faculty and staff development.
An element that's perhaps not as sexy, but vitally important is the performance management side, the compliance side. Sometimes I've noticed places where it's almost like the victory is in getting the grant, but that's really where the work just begins. And I think part of the success for Wake Tech is the fact that we do what we say we're going to do. And you've been so strong as a leader in that aspect, which is not as much fun, but is vitally important to success in this world. Yeah,
it is critical because we can go get the funds and we can work really hard over a few months' time to write an amazing proposal, but if that doesn't actually do anything, then what's the point? So we work really hard to make sure those funds are impactful and that the ideas we put out there are things that really fit us. If you put an idea out there that might get funded but doesn't fit, then the project doesn't go well. And most projects are several years long, so you have a few years to sort of deal with a project that wasn't planned well. So the planning piece, even when a grant isn't funded, is really critical because it helps us get our ideas together, help us develop a concrete budget of what it would take to deliver on that. And then, yes, we focus on the monitoring to make sure we're meeting the goals and objectives, and the budget spending and the compliance.
Let's dig into some of those successes. And one of the areas that Wake Tech has been very successful is with National Science Foundation grants. And last year, maybe a little over a year ago, we had Dr. Pontchartrain here, who was the Dr. Ponch, as he goes by, who's the National Science Foundation Director, came specifically to Wake Tech with Congresswoman Rawls to kind of celebrate Wake Tech as a community college and our success with the National Science Foundation. Spent a whole afternoon with you and our students and our great faculty who have helped us gain these grants through the National Science Foundation and become a leading community college with the National Science Foundation. Talk about those efforts and some of the successes that have come along in recent years.
Mm-hmm. So National Science Foundation is a federal agency that in many ways understands the community college landscape, and not all of them do. So sometimes our community college and our colleagues across the country don't fit proposal application concepts. So NSF is one that has this Advanced Technological Education Program, or ATE, that is designed for two-year colleges. And it was actually, the legislation that created it was authored by our now retired Representative David Price. Mm-hmm. So he, I think, and his team have always been committed to community colleges and Wake Tech, and have helped over the years to help us get ideas together and then to usher them through the application process. So some of the ATE projects we've had, around cloud computing, the program, originally the simulation and game development program was started with an ATE grant.
Oh, back in the day.
Back in the day, and then enhanced with more modern training that is really helping us move right alongside industry and prepare
the photogrammetry grant.
Yeah, exactly. Really cool stuff. And so NSF has been delightful to work with as an agency. I think that they see the value of CTE education and preparing a workforce, a 2-year degree pathway to work. And so we've very much appreciated their commitment to us and their investment and their dollars.
Yeah, we really do. And it's been so meaningful, from the work with cloud, game development, really unique grant too that we're working on now that will impact what we're doing at our new site, what we're calling Wake Tech East, with the 4.0 grant. That's one that's very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting to see multiple programs come together in a multidisciplinary way to prepare that sort of
industry super tech idea. I love that word, super technician.
Yeah, and the leadership in the best area, Laura Eddington, for example, has just really helped us set that vision, and our team can run with that. So in the grant development process, we ask a lot of questions because we kind of know where we need to get to from a written proposal standpoint, and so there's a lot of iteration that happens, data gathering, looking at what's the workforce so that we can show that these funds will be invested in jobs that will essentially be a place for our students to go. And so the grant development process and matching up a funder's priorities like NSF's, it's exciting work if you like that long range planning.
Yeah.
And I think it's
not immediate gratification.
It's not necessarily quick. No, and I always say with grants, they'll rarely go as planned.
Yeah.
So when you write a multi-year plan, you get to year 3 and it's often, things don't look the same as when you wrote it. So we do a lot of pivoting. But the important thing is to stick with it and to move with it instead of just sort of forgetting about it and letting it not kind of be a living project.
Yeah.
And that's where we also spend a lot of time with our teams of just helping them put those dollars to good work.
Well, I've already learned something through this conversation I did not know, but it shows the importance of grants in the evolution of our programs. And one of the programs that we're well known for now, but if you could think how far we went back, the simulation and game design, started with a real emphasis around simulation. And as our area has become gaming capital of the U.S., strategically positioned through our program that's moved more into game development. So I guess I really didn't know, or I had forgotten about that original grant that started. And then we've had the most recent grant with photogrammetry, which takes us to the next place. But that's a great story of a development of a program that is so strong for a region that needs it in our game development program.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Kai Wong has been at the table for many of the projects across Wake Tech's grant history, and that was one where he had a strong role among others at the college. And it's just, there's nothing more satisfying, I guess, with a grant is to see it wrap up and everybody take a breath, but then see it sustained.
Yeah.
Another great example of that is in 2015, we had funds from the Walmart Foundation to support veterans coming back to school. And so we tried some accelerated training and workforce continuing ed programs and additional wraparound supports. And through that project, it sort of coalesced a lot of folks at the college, and now we see, an Office of Military and Veteran Support and a real distinct group of folks that are meeting the needs of our veterans. And so it's not always super high dollar or really flashy grant awards that can make a really big difference.
I'm going to ask you, and you may have just answered it, but think about this. I'm going to ask you the last question in a minute, not yet, is what's your favorite grant that's maybe not as known, but and I'll tell you what mine is here. That is, and I love all the grants and, such significant, but I love our START program that has been funded. It was such a unique innovation among faculty, and then it's a program that's been recognized by the National Science Foundation. I know Dr. Ponch keeps in touch with a lot of our START interns. Can you talk about that very unique program that is so impactful here at Wake Tech?
Yeah, the START program gives us great warm hearts,
goosebumps.
I think. Yeah, and that actually, from a grants perspective, that team, led by Dr. Jackie Swanek, worked multiple times with big federal applications before they got funded. I think they got funded on the third big proposal, and we described it from our office as finding the glass slipper of the right opportunity to really fit their program.
Tell our listeners what START is.
START is our undergraduate research program. So I think it's been in planning for like about 10 years now that it's first started.
Very grassroots.
Very grassroots among faculty to give students an opportunity to conduct undergraduate research. And undergraduate research often doesn't happen. It's typically when you're a junior or senior, you might get a research opportunity, but we know by introducing it earlier, it gives students a different way of learning. It gives them some career experience to kind of try things out in a lab. And we found, especially for students who maybe didn't see themselves in STEM, getting them in a hands-on environment can be really impactful. And so not just doing research, but partnered with a mentor. And one of the things that the current NSF grant supports is funding the peer mentors, because it had been essentially a labor of love, and it still is, because there's so much demand and that we find students need a lot of support, but it actually lets the students earn money. So maybe they're not working as much of a part-time job. They can actually spend their time earning money, doing their projects, and also recognize the commitment of the faculty to mentor the students. It also has external partners across I guess mostly the triangle. So some of them at 4 years, some of them at state agencies. And so, I just admire how much opportunities there for our students, and we know, because we hear from our students, that it helps them stay in school, helps them see themselves in a STEM pathway, and hopefully on their way to a really good job.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Wake Tech programs, because I'll hear from the students, see the students, talk to them, and you see this spark of love for STEM that develops and is nurtured, and then through that opportunity, which gives them both a paid internship that goes on their resume, but you just see this confidence and this, these unique scientists that are being formed here at Wake Tech among students who may not have thought it was for them or their pathway, but are accelerated as a result. And that grant has been an accelerator for that unique program.
Yeah, I know I was interested in science as a high schooler, but I went to such a small school that all that was offered was like what was required by the state. And so I went to my first college level science class and stepped into a chemistry lab and was like, what is this foreign place? So I think it's really important for students as early as possible to get those exposures. And I've had multiple internships in my higher ed and pathway, and they are just work-based learning internships. They're just so valuable to getting to know what the workplace is like. And I think you ultimately become a better employee. You better understand those employability skills, those soft skills, because you've had that chance to work early on.
Building on that, our region is a hub for science jobs. And that's why we emphasize programs here at Wake Tech that you would not find at many other community colleges. And one of the areas that you've been instrumental, your team, in helping us develop over the recent years has been our life sciences and our biotechnology area. And a significant grant that we have, this is part of an overall state grant, but Wake Tech playing a very big lead role with the Build Back Better grant. But other areas of biotech grants have helped us propel to, I think, a forefront in this particular discipline area. Can you tell us a little bit about the work in that area? Because that's been a lot, you've put a lot in your team into that development with our biotech team.
Yeah, well, for one, it's an area where we always say, please explain what this is and what you do. And we really ask the folks, the faculty and the leadership in those areas, like, help us understand, what does it mean? And we're not afraid to ask very basic questions because we need to be able to write a proposal about it. So, over the years, we've seen the funding come through the system office for like the bio network funding, and then more recently, the Build Back Better funding. So some of that national investment in the workforce, partnered with other colleges across the state and the North Carolina Biotechnology Center with the system office. And then we've more recently received an NSF grant transferred to us to focus on ag biotech. So that's another example of meeting, having a multiple entry points into the workforce in the area. And to me, it's really exciting to check the news and see there's new companies coming all the time, and think, how are we going to meet that demand? What will that look like for what we need to be doing at Wake Tech? What do our labs need to look like? What kind of things do our students need? How good are the jobs?
Yeah.
So that's just, I think, a really exciting thing about living in this area and seeing so much economic development opportunity.
Such a breadth of everything you can imagine of opportunity.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I think as we sort of, I guess we're back to normal, emerge from the pandemic.
Well, as you said, that's the next segue point, because we are back to normal. We're not masked up, we're not distanced, but I don't think we'll ever be the same. And your role, there were several roles here at the college that you almost took on a whole additional job during that time frame. You were managing resource money with our finance team and others, Dr. Gail Green and others around, this infusion of resources that came to us that kept us moving forward, kept our students moving forward with emergency aid. Sometimes I don't like to look back on those days because they were, they were difficult days. We were talking all the time about managing money, helping students, moving forward with distance ed. But it moved us forward. I think it accelerated us. And so hit the positives about how Wake Tech is different as a result of the pandemic and some of the resources that came in that propel us towards the future.
Yeah, wow, there's so many ways. First, there was, I think, the groundwork that helped us when the pandemic started around online education, right?
Distance ed, EPIC.
So, EPIC, we had a Compass grant. It was a first in the world grant by Department of Education that was focused on closing the gap in online learners, that set up some studios for faculty to go in and record cool videos and content for online learning. So that was certainly helpful. I like to think it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have had about $85 million.
You really don't want to go through it again.
Nope. The only part I'd like to do again is we gave away more than $30 million directly to students in emergency aid. We would take that money again.
Yeah, it really helped sustain them through the difficult days.
Yes, and I was actually on maternity leave when the pandemic started, and I came back and it's like, okay, we have this money from Department of Education, Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, HERF, all these acronyms, and it was pretty vague about what we could do with it. So that part was certainly hard, but in the end, we gave a lot of money away to students. We were able to set priorities with you and the leadership about what we really wanted to do with that money, and recovering lost revenue so that we could maintain operations, maintain payroll. That was really important money. We did a huge investment in online learning infrastructure, so being able to outfit classrooms, give students a laptop, and we also, again, that direct student aid, but also student support, so virtual tutors, being able to have e-proctoring staff. So I think we did a really good job with that money, investing it in really smart ways. And, there were frustrations, right, when we couldn't use it for payroll or bonuses, and it's hard to have money with, a distinct
you don't really know what all
purpose when you know you need it in another place. So that part was tough, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out all the things we could do. Yes, and it changed over time, and we would get new guidance, and then there was a change in the presidential administration, and the Secretary of Education changed, and then they came in with new rules. So I think I still have printed copies with coffee stains on them of all those guidance, because I would just have to flip through them really quickly. Now I'm more digital, so now I can do things as I had to learn.
We sort of all are,
Right?
I mean, think about, did we ever use Teams and Zoom before that time?
Our team used to commonly run around to 3 campuses a day for grant development meetings, and now we can, patch in.
Well, I think you and Marla Tart and Gail Green and everybody who was so involved on a day-to-day basis, but, I think we were very accountable with the funds. We were very, we were conservative, but we also used the resources to help bridge our students, bridge our faculty and staff, but also propel us for a future. And I think that's sort of a story of grants, is that, you mentioned something that's really important, is we were as prepared as any college could be for something you never can prepare for, because of the work that took place previously around the First in the World grant, the Compass grant, the EPIC work, the distance ed. A lot of that was based on grants. A lot of that, you mentioned Kai Wang and others who were involved in those efforts. And I often felt like when the pandemic hit, it was like we had been running this race, but we had only finished 60 to 70% of it. And then we had to sprint, but we did that, and it made us stronger today than, we wouldn't want to go through that again, but it made us stronger and better, and the grant work prepared us for that time.
Yeah.
All right, we've been talking. We could talk about your successes. You ought to have your own trophy case, or it's like a hunter that has heads on. It's kind of, but it's. I asked you to save the last question, and it may not be what's your favorite grant, because you don't want to say favorites.
I couldn't say. Yeah.
But you mentioned a grant like the Veterans Grant. Is there another grant out there that just, it didn't get as much maybe attention, but it just hit the sweet spot? It just makes your heart say, this was really what it's about.
Yeah, I think, we have so many grants that a lot of them don't get a lot of attention. We've had them for a long time. One of them is our Department of Education High School Equivalency Program grant. We've had that one.
The HEP program?
HEP program.
Tell people what that's one of my favorite programs.
So that is a program that is focused on providing GED or high school equivalency training to migrant farm workers and their family members. And that is a team that is quietly innovating. They went online.
Unique
pre-pandemic. They were making those moves, and they can manage a budget so carefully to serve those students. And that's where we see students who are earning their high school equivalency, learning the English language, and then moving on to that next step. And for more than 15 years, that's been a high-performing project. And I think many of the other ones in college and career readiness are grant-funded. Some of their basic operations come with a lot of just grant management work that maybe you don't have to worry about if you just get a budget from the college. And those projects, we have a refugee services grant dollar, so funds to, again, train with English language learning, help with bridging other resources for resettlement. More recently, the refugees coming from Afghanistan and the Ukraine, that's work that our college does that I think
you don't hear as much
everybody doesn't always hear about, but that's an early pathway for those students, that first rung on the ladder, and hopefully we see them just continue to climb.
Well, I'm glad you closed with the HEP program, our high school equivalency program. It needs a better name, but it's such a dedicated group of folks, and it represents the best of what our college is about in terms of opportunity. And it's also, leads to what is one of my favorite event of the year is the HEP graduation. I love our graduations, our big graduations. This one's a little smaller. It's also with our other students who are finishing up their high school equivalency work. But when the students and their families come from all over the state and even other states, the migrant farm workers, and you see their appreciation for the opportunity that was provided by the people here at Wake Tech and you, Amy, through the work of your team, it's the good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy McDonald, for creating and making so much good stuff here at Wake Tech as our Dean of Sponsored Programs. Thanks for being our guest on the first episode of 2024, the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Thank you to the listeners for joining us this year and joining us on this episode. And stay tuned each month as we profile a new area of Wake Tech where you can learn more about all the exciting things that are happening at your community college, Wake Tech.
It's a new year and records are already being set at Wake Tech. I'm Joshua McKinney with your Wake Tech News Update. The spring semester began for the college on January 8th with record enrollment. Faculty and staff welcomed more than 23,000 degree-seeking students for the first day of classes, up 11% from a year ago. More than 3,500 of those students are new to Wake Tech. If you missed Wake Tech's 16-week spring semester, there's still time to join us or add another class to your schedule to get finished faster. Check out our 12 and 8-week mini-mester accelerated classes to fit your schedule. Visit springahead.waketech.edu. Dr. Scott Rawls is pleased to announce more than 2,000 students made the honor roll for the fall 2023 semester, up nearly 140 students from the same semester last year. 922 students who earned a place on the President's List maintained a grade point average of 4.0. 1,203 students who made the Dean's List maintained a GPA of at least 3.5. Congratulations. Wake Tech students will be able to use their student ID badges to vote in primary and general elections in North Carolina this year. Wake Tech student ID was recently approved by the North Carolina Board of Elections. Approval means Wake Tech students will be able to use their student IDs in primary elections at the polls starting on March 5th. For the latest news and much more, you can visit us online at news.waketech.edu. And that's your Wake Tech News Update.
This is LaTanya Parsons, the coordinator of student money management here at Wake Tech, and I'd like to give you 5 tips for paying down debt. The first step is to assess your situation. We need to know where we are, our starting point, if we want to get to where we want to. So don't hide your head in the sand. I know that it's tempting not to look, but assessing, seeing where you are is the first step in making sure that you get to and reach your goals. The second thing is making sure you have a realistic budget or repayment plan for your debt. So you have to know what your income is, what are your expenses, and then you can factor in paying down the debt that you're ready to get rid of. Third, you want to select the best possible debt repayment strategy for your financial situation. So for instance, you may use the debt snowball, which is tackling the smallest debt first. That way you can see results pretty quickly. Others may like to use the debt avalanche. This is where you go after the highest interest rate. So you want to make sure you save more money in the long run. So whatever your strategy, make sure that you employ one that is best for you. The fourth tip that I would give you is, please, it may be tempting, but don't take on more debt in order to get rid of debt. So try to eliminate taking more debt on if you can, if possible. All of our situations are different, so that you can eliminate the debt. And number 5 is, if all of this seems a little bit overwhelming, and I know it definitely can be, seek professional help. So there are financial professionals. If you're a student here at Wake Tech, you have me, or you can seek someone else that can help you get through this process smoothly. But just know you can do it with a plan. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Join us next month for more insightful conversations about the programs and people of Wake Tech and how the college changes lives every day. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast app to have each episode delivered right to your computer or mobile device. For more, find us at podcast.waketech.edu. To learn more about Wake Tech's exceptional educational opportunities, visit waketech.edu.